The smell of a hospital is something you never really forget. It's a sterile, sharp scent, a mix of bleach, rubbing alcohol, and that faint, underlying metallic tang of fear. For 15 days, that smell was my only constant companion. That, and the rhythmic, indifferent beep of the heart monitor next to my bed. I am 68 years old. My name is Rosa. For over 4 decades, I have been the anchor of my family. I was the woman who remembered every birthday, cooked every Thanksgiving turkey, wiped every feverish forehead, and quietly slipped $20 bills into the hands of my children when they were struggling, even long after they had grown into adults. I raised 3 children, Jackson, Chloe, and Tyler. I built my life around them. I thought I had built a safety net of love and obligation. I was wrong. Sitting in that hospital bed, my hip throbbing with a deep, bone-aching fire from the replacement surgery, I learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. Sometimes the people you would take a bullet for are the ones holding the gun. To understand the depth of the betrayal, you have to go back to Thanksgiving, just a few weeks before my surgery. My house in the suburbs, the house I had lived in for 35 years, the house where they took their first steps, was filled with the smell of baked mac and cheese, collard greens, and roasting turkey. The dining room table was practically groaning under the weight of the food I had spent 2 days preparing. My joints had been aching terribly by then. The doctor had already told me that the cartilage in my right hip was completely gone, bone grinding on bone, but I pushed through the pain because that's what mothers do. We endure. They were all there. Jackson, my eldest, at 45. He walked in wearing a tailored suit that cost more than my first car, his wife trailing behind him. Jackson is a regional sales director for a logistics company. He loves the appearance of success. He loves the leased BMW in the driveway and the country club membership he can barely afford. Throughout dinner, he kept checking his phone, talking loudly about his mortgage and the rising property taxes in his gated community, subtly hinting at how tight money was. Then there was Chloe, my 41-year-old daughter, a real estate agent, or a realtor and lifestyle influencer, as her Instagram bio dictates. She arrived in a flurry of designer perfume and perfectly highlighted hair. She spent the first 20 minutes of dinner rearranging the cranberry sauce and the centerpieces so she could get the perfect lighting for a photo. "Family is everything," she typed into her phone before ignoring us for the next hour to watch the likes roll in. And finally, Tyler, my 32-year-old baby boy, the dreamer, the one who was always just one big break away from becoming a millionaire. He arrived late, smelling faintly of marijuana and expensive cologne, immediately cornering me in the kitchen to ask if I could spot him a few $100s for a new cryptocurrency investment. "It's a sure thing, Ma," he had promised, his eyes wide and earnest. I gave him the money. I always did. When we finally sat down to eat, I tapped my water glass with a butter knife. The clinking sound cut through their chatter. "Listen up now," I said, my voice steady despite the sharp pain shooting down my leg. "The doctor scheduled my hip replacement for the 3rd of December. It's a major surgery. I'm going to be in the hospital for a few days, and then the recovery at home. Well, it's going to be a long road. I'm going to need help." The reaction was immediate and aggressively reassuring. It was a chorus of textbook filial piety. "Mom, don't even worry about it," Jackson had said, puffing out his chest, the very picture of the responsible patriarch. "I'll take the first few days off. I can bring my laptop and work right from the chair in your room. We've got this." Chloe reached across the table, her manicured hand squeezing mine. "Oh my God, Mom, of course. I'll coordinate the meals. I can stay with you on the weekends. You know I'm swamped with the spring listings, but you're my priority." Tyler nodded vigorously, his mouth full of turkey. "I'll do the night shifts, Ma. I'm a night owl anyway. I can help you to the bathroom, whatever you need. You won't be alone for a single second." "You won't be alone for a single second." Those words echoed in my mind on the morning of December 4th, the day after my surgery. I woke up in a haze of anesthesia and pain medication. The room was dimly lit, the winter sun barely peeking through the industrial blinds. My mouth tasted like cotton. I slowly turned my head, expecting to see Jackson sitting in the uncomfortable vinyl armchair in the corner, his laptop glowing. The chair was empty. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my brain. I reached for the plastic cup of water on the rolling tray table, but it was just out of reach. My hip felt like it had been cracked open and filled with hot cement. I fumbled for my phone. It was 10 a.m. I tapped the screen. No missed calls, no text messages. They're just running late, I whispered to the empty room. Jackson probably hit traffic. You know how the interstate gets. I was making excuses for them before I even knew I needed to. It's a reflex. You spend your whole life cushioning the world for your children. You don't stop just because you're the one who needs a soft place to land. A nurse bustled in a few minutes later, a bright, capable young woman named Kiara. She had dark, tired eyes, but a warm smile. She checked my vitals, her hands gentle. "Good morning, Miss Rosa. How's the pain today?" she asked, making notes on her tablet. "It's manageable, sweetheart," I lied. "Could you hand me that water? My son is supposed to be here soon. I think he just got held up." Kiara handed me the cup with a sympathetic nod. "Take your time. Visiting hours just started. I'm sure he'll be here." By 2 p.m., the chair was still empty. I picked up my phone and dialed Jackson's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Jackson. Leave a message and let's close some deals." I didn't leave a message. I sent a text instead. "Hey, baby. Woke up a few hours ago. Surgery went well. When do you think you'll get here?" I watched the screen. Delivered. Read. 15 minutes passed. Then 3 gray dots appeared, dancing for a moment before a message popped up. "Hey, Mom. So glad the surgery went well. Listen, absolute nightmare at the office today. Q4 projections are a mess, and the VP flew in unannounced. I'm trapped. I texted Chloe to see if she can cover my shift today. Love you." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Not because he was busy, I understood busy, but because of the casualness of it. The flippant use of the word shift, like taking care of his mother who just had her bones sawed into was a retail job he could easily swap out of. I waited an hour before calling Chloe. She answered on the second ring, background noise loud and chaotic. "Mom, oh my gosh, hey, how are you feeling?" Her voice was an octave higher than normal, the voice she used when she knew she was doing something wrong. "I'm hurting, Chloe," I said, my voice barely a rasp. "Jackson couldn't make it." "Are you coming?" There was a pause. I could hear the wind and someone laughing in the distance. "Mom, I am so sorry. Jackson texted me, but I'm literally at the airport. I have this massive networking retreat in Aspen. I told you about this, didn't I? It's for luxury listings. I can't back out now. It's thousands of dollars down the drain. Tyler said he was going to go tonight anyway. He'll be there." She hadn't told me about Aspen. I closed my eyes. "Okay, Chloe. Have a safe flight." "Love you, Mom. I'll FaceTime you from the slopes." She hung up. I set the phone down on my chest. It felt like a brick. By 8 p.m., the hospital quieted down. The lights in the hallway dimmed. The dinner tray, a sad affair of lukewarm broth and green jello, had been taken away mostly untouched. I waited for Tyler. The night owl, the baby. I texted him at 9 p.m. Delivered, not read. I called him at 10:30 p.m., straight to voicemail. I called again at midnight. The automated voice told me the mailbox was full. That first night was the longest of my life. Every time the door creaked open, my heart leaped, hoping to see a familiar face. But it was only Kiara, coming in to check my blood pressure and administer my pain meds. "Still flying solo, Miss Rosa?" she asked softly around 2 a.m., adjusting my IV. I turned my head to the window, staring out at the dark parking lot. The pride wouldn't let me cry in front of her. "They're very busy people, Kiara. Very important jobs." The days bled into one another. Day 2, Day 4, Day 7. The hospital became a bubble of isolation. I learned the schedules of the nurses. I learned how to use the bed controls to shift my weight just enough to stop the cramping in my good leg. I learned that the physical therapy at 10 a.m. was pure torture. A young man forcing me out of bed and making me walk the hallway with a heavy metal walker while tears of agony streamed down my face. And I learned to stop looking at the door. The excuses kept trickling in, mostly via text. They never called. Calling required hearing my voice, hearing the pain and the silence behind it. Texting was easy. Texting was cowardly. Jackson. "Mom, they're sending me to Chicago for the week. Job's on the line. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Ordered you some flowers." The flowers arrived on day 6, a generic arrangement of carnations from the hospital gift shop. They died 2 days later. No one threw them out. Chloe's Instagram was fully active. While I was struggling to use a bedpan because pressing the call button made me feel like a burden, my daughter was posting videos of herself drinking Aperol spritzes in a ski lodge. #hustle, #girlboss, #AspenLife. She texted me exactly twice, both times to ask if I knew where the spare key to her storage unit was. Tyler simply vanished. Complete radio silence. It was as if he had dropped off the face of the earth. By day 10, the physical pain was beginning to subside, replaced by a dull, constant ache. But the emotional pain was expanding, filling up my chest, choking me. I felt invisible. I felt discarded. You spend your life raising them, teaching them how to walk, how to speak, how to navigate the world. You pour every ounce of your energy, your youth, your finances into their foundation. And when the time comes for them to offer just a fraction of that care in return, you realize you were never a person to them. You were just a resource. And resources, when they break down, are left in the dark. The hospital administration started coming in around day 12. A woman with a clipboard and a tight smile talking about Medicare Part A, discharge plans, and out-of-pocket maximums. "Mrs. Hayes," the administrator said, standing at the foot of my bed, "your Medicare covers the bulk of the procedure, but we need to discuss your discharge plan. Given your age and the nature of the surgery, you cannot be discharged to an empty home. You need 24/7 assistance for the first 2 weeks. Who will be your primary caregiver at home?" I stared at the ceiling tiles. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. "My children," I lied, my voice hollow. "My son Jackson." "Wonderful. We'll need him to come in and sign the discharge paperwork and go over the physical therapy schedule. He's out of town on business. He'll be back on the 15th. The woman frowned, her pen hovering over the clipboard. "I see. Well, we can keep you for a few more days under observation, but the insurance company will start pushing back. We need someone here." It was Kiara who finally broke me. On day 14, she came in to change my dressings. She closed the door behind her, pulling the privacy curtain all the way around. She didn't have her tablet. She just pulled up a stool and sat right next to my bed. She took my hand. Her skin was warm. It was the only human touch I had felt in 2 weeks that wasn't strictly clinical. "Miss Rosa," Kiara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I'm not supposed to step over the line here, but I've been on your rotation for 2 weeks. I've seen the flowers die. I've seen you staring at that phone. I see a lot of things in this ward." I looked away, my jaw tight. "I don't know what you're talking about, sweetheart." Kiara squeezed my hand gently. "Rosa, look at me." I turned my head. Her eyes were full of a deep, sorrowful understanding. "You don't have anyone coming, do you?" she asked softly. "They aren't busy. They just aren't coming. The dam broke. The dam. 40 years of stoicism, of being the strong black mother who held the world on her shoulders, shattered in a sterile hospital room. A sob tore out of my throat, loud and ugly. I covered my face with my free hand, the tears hot and fast, soaking into the thin hospital pillow. I cried for the Thanksgivings I had exhausted myself over. I cried for the tuition bills I had quietly paid. I cried for the sleepless nights I spent worrying about Jackson's mortgage, Chloe's relationships, Tyler's future. Kiara didn't offer empty platitudes. She didn't tell me it was going to be okay. She just sat there and held my hand while I mourned the living. When I finally caught my breath, wiping my face with a scratchy tissue, Kiara looked at me with serious eyes. "Rosa, I need to ask you a hard question, and I need you to give me an honest answer. Should I call social services? We have resources. We can set up a home health aide. We can arrange for meal deliveries. But I can't let them discharge you into an empty house with a fresh hip replacement." Social services. The words were a slap to the face. To be an elder, a mother of 3 grown, able-bodied children, and to be handed over to the state because your own blood couldn't be bothered. The sheer humiliation of it burned away the last of my tears. Suddenly, a shift happened inside me. The profound, suffocating sorrow began to crystallize. It hardened. It turned cold. I looked at Kiara. I sat up a little straighter, ignoring the sharp pull in my hip. I reached over to the bedside table and grabbed a tissue, carefully dabbing the corners of my eyes. "No, Kiara," I said, and my voice sounded different. The tremor was gone. It was smooth, flat, and dangerously calm. "Do not call social services. I am not a ward of the state. I am a grown woman. "But who is going to help you?" she asked, worried. "I will help myself," I replied. "Tell the administration I will be discharging myself tomorrow. I will arrange my own transportation. I will handle my own care." "Miss Rosa, you can barely walk with the walker." "I said I will handle it, Kiara, and I thank you. Truly, you have been the only grace in this place." On the morning of the 15th day, the doctor gave me the reluctant green light. He gave me a prescription for painkillers, blood thinners, and a lecture about fall risks. I packed my small overnight bag myself. Every bend, every stretch was an agony, but I refused to call the nurse for help. I put on my loose sweatpants and my cardigan. I gripped the handles of my metal walker. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I didn't call Jackson. I didn't call Chloe. I didn't call Tyler. I opened the Uber app. Destination? Home. Confirm ride. A young kid named Mateo picked me up. He drove a clean Honda Civic and played soft jazz on the radio. When he saw me inching out of the hospital sliding doors with my walker, he immediately threw the car in park and rushed over. "Ma'am, please let me help you," he said, taking my small bag and gently holding my elbow as I maneuvered into the passenger seat. "Careful now. Watch your head." A total stranger. Earning maybe $15 for this ride. Treating me with more dignity and care than the children I had carried in my womb. "Thank you, Mateo," I said quietly as he buckled my seatbelt for me. The ride to the suburbs took 45 minutes. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets roll by. The holiday decorations were up. Houses covered in twinkling lights, plastic reindeer on the lawns. It all looked so fake to me now. A giant stage set masking the rot inside the houses. "Do you have family waiting for you at home, ma'am?" Mateo asked politely, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "It looks like you just had a procedure." "I had my hip replaced," I said smoothly. "And no, Mateo, I live alone." He pulled into my driveway. The house looked exactly as I had left it, but it felt entirely different. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a museum of my past mistakes. Mateo helped me out of the car, walked me all the way to the front porch, and waited until I managed to unlock the front door. "You take care of yourself, Miss Rosa," he said, tipping an imaginary hat before jogging back to his car. I pushed the door open. The air inside was stale and freezing cold. I flipped the light switch in the foyer. Nothing happened. I frowned and flipped it again. Dead. Using my walker, I shuffled painstakingly into the kitchen. The linoleum floor felt like ice through my thin socks. On the kitchen island, sitting exactly where I had left it over 2 weeks ago, was a stack of mail. Right on top was the electric bill. I picked it up. Before the surgery, I had handed Jackson an envelope with cash. "Jack, baby, please make sure you pay the utility bill while I'm in the hospital. I don't want to come home to the dark." He had taken the cash, kissed my cheek, and said, "Got it covered, Ma. Don't stress." I looked up at the ceiling. The power was shut off. He had taken the money and let his mother's power be cut in the dead of winter. I opened the refrigerator. The little light bulb inside was dead, of course. The smell hit me instantly. Without power, the food had spoiled. The Thanksgiving leftovers, the turkey I had roasted, the collard greens, were covered in a layer of fuzzy green mold. Beside them sat a shriveled lemon and an empty carton of milk. I stood there in the cold, dark kitchen, leaning heavily on my walker. My hips screamed in protest. My stomach rumbled with a hollow ache. This was the sum total of my life's work. A dark house, a rotting turkey, and a body broken by years of labor. They had stripped me bare. They thought I was a helpless, fragile old woman who would just sit in the dark and wait for them to throw me a crumb of their time. They thought the well they had been drinking from all their lives was finally empty. I slowly closed the refrigerator door. The echo sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. I wasn't crying anymore. The woman who wept in the hospital room had stayed in that bed. The woman standing in the kitchen now was someone they hadn't met yet. I reached into my purse, pulled out my fully charged phone, and turned on the flashlight. I pointed the beam down the hallway toward my home office. "All right," I whispered to the empty house. "You want to leave me in the dark? Let's see how well you navigate when I turn the lights out on you." I began the slow, agonizing walk toward my desk. It was time to open the books. The walk down the hallway to my home office took me 10 full minutes. Every time I lifted the aluminum frame of the walker and placed it down on the hardwood floor, a jolt of pain radiated from my hip all the way to my jaw. The house was freezing, holding on to the deep December chill. I used the flashlight on my phone to guide my way, the narrow beam cutting through the darkness like a solitary lighthouse. When I finally reached the office, I eased myself into the heavy leather chair behind my desk. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the absolute silence of a house that had been abandoned. First things first, I pulled up my banking app on my phone, navigated to the bill pay section, and authorized a direct transfer to the local utility company. Then I called their 24-hour automated service, punched in my confirmation number, and paid the late fee. Within 20 minutes, I heard the mechanical hum of the refrigerator kicking back on in the kitchen. A moment later, the desk lamp beside me flickered to life, bathing the room in a warm yellow glow. Let there be light. Almost as if the sudden surge of electricity had sent a signal out into the universe, my cell phone vibrated on the desk. The screen lit up with Jackson's name. I stared at it for 3 rings. I took a deep, steadying breath, closed my eyes, and let my voice drop an octave, adding a slight, breathy tremor to it. The voice of a frail, confused old woman. "Hello?" I answered. "Mom, hey." Jackson's voice boomed through the speaker, layered with an exaggerated, booming cheerfulness that made my stomach turn. "I just called the hospital to check on you, and the nurse said you checked yourself out? What were you thinking, Ma? You can't be doing things like that. You got me worried sick." Worried sick. He sounded like a man who had just finished a good steak dinner, not a man frantic about his mother. "I wanted to come home, Jackson," I said softly, leaning into the act. "The hospital was so loud. I thought you were coming to get me today." "I told you, Ma, I'm in Chicago. The VP has me tied up in these endless strategy meetings. I can't just walk out. You know how cutthroat the logistics business is right now." He paused, and I could hear the subtle shift in his tone. The pivot. Here it comes. "Listen, speaking of the hospital, I saw the explanation of benefits the insurance company emailed over. Your Medicare Part A covered the surgery, but that deductible for the extended stay is a killer. And they're talking about billing out of network for the anesthesiologist." He sighed, a heavy theatrical sound. "I'm just saying, Mom, this is a terrible time for unexpected expenses. The mortgage rate on my house just adjusted, and the property taxes in the gated community went up another 12%. If I have to cover this hospital bill for you, I'm going to have to pull from my 401k, and the penalty on that is brutal." He was laying the groundwork. He was preemptively crying broke so I wouldn't ask him for a dime. He didn't ask if I had eaten. He didn't ask how I got home. He asked about the anesthesiologist's bill. "Don't you worry about the hospital bills, Jackson," I murmured, keeping my voice weak. "I'll figure it out with the billing department." "Okay, good. That's good, Ma. Look, I gotta run back into this meeting. I'll try to send Chloe over tomorrow to check your bandages, okay? Hang tight." He hung up. 10 minutes later, Chloe called. "Mom, Jackson said you're home? Oh my God, you are so stubborn." She sounded out of breath, the faint sound of pop music playing in the background. "I'm literally at the Aspen airport waiting for my flight back. Do you have any idea how stressful this is? I'm exhausted from networking, and now I have to worry about you being home alone." "I'm fine, Chloe," I whispered. "Well, you shouldn't have left. Jackson and I are spread so thin right now. Between his job and my real estate clients, the market is insane, Mom. I had to put down $5,000 for this retreat just to stay competitive. We're grinding out here. I'll order you some groceries on Instacart tomorrow, okay? Just stay in bed." She hung up too. Tyler didn't call. He sent a single text message. "Heard you are home. Glad you're okay. Super stressed about money RN. Crypto crashed. We'll visit when I can afford gas." I set the phone face down on the mahogany desk. I looked at the framed photographs lining the walls of my office. Jackson in his graduation gown. Chloe holding her first real estate license. Tyler as a little boy, missing his 2 front teeth, smiling up at me. For decades, they had operated under a very specific assumption about me. They believed I was just a sweet, hard-working widow who scraped by on a meager fixed income and my late husband's small life insurance policy. They thought the money I occasionally gave them, the small gifts to help with a down payment, the sudden clerical errors that miraculously wiped out Tyler's student loan debt, were just lucky breaks or the result of me eating canned soup for a month to save up. They thought they knew everything about Rosa Hayes. They didn't know a damn thing. With a grunt of effort, I pushed myself up from the chair. I gripped the walker and moved toward the closet in the corner of the office. I pushed aside the row of winter coats, reaching into the very back until my knuckles brushed against cold, heavy steel. It was a fireproof floor safe, bolted directly into the foundation of the house. I knelt down on my good knee, the pain in my right hip screaming in protest, and spun the combination dial. 341258. The heavy door clicked and swung open with a soft, pneumatic hiss. Inside wasn't jewelry or stacks of old cash. It was a collection of thick, black leather binders. I pulled the largest one out, hauled myself back up to the desk, and opened it under the lamplight. The first page was a yellowed business license from 1984, Rosa's Southern Comfort Catering. When the kids were little, they thought my cooking was just a hobby. They saw me baking pies and frying chicken for church events and local weddings. What they didn't see were the corporate contracts I secured in the late 90s. They didn't see the massive pharmaceutical conventions I catered downtown, feeding thousands of executives. They saw a mother wearing an apron. They didn't see the CEO negotiating vendor margins and wholesale supply lines. But more importantly, they didn't see what I did with the profits. I turned the pages of the binder, looking at the quarterly statements from Vanguard and Fidelity. While my children were busy buying leased luxury cars and taking vacations they put on high-interest credit cards, I was living below my means. I maxed out my Roth IRA every single year. I poured the catering profits into low-cost S&P 500 index funds and blue-chip dividend stocks. I let compound interest do the heavy lifting while I quietly flipped pancakes for my children. I flipped to the summary page from the previous month. The numbers were neatly printed in black ink. Total net worth, $8.4 million. I wasn't a poor, fragile widow. I was a self-made millionaire. I had hidden it from them on purpose. When Jackson was a teenager, I saw how entitled he was becoming, how he expected everything to be handed to him. I wanted them to have the drive to build their own lives, to understand the value of a dollar earned through sweat. I thought if they believed I was just getting by, they would step up. They would work hard. It was the greatest miscalculation of my life. Instead of teaching them independence, my secrecy had only bred contempt. Because they thought I had nothing of significant financial value, they decided I had no value as a person. I was just a domestic servant they had outgrown. A convenience. An ATM that occasionally dispensed a few $100 when they cried loud enough. I picked up my phone again and dialed a number I knew by heart. Sterling Associates, Arthur Sterling speaking, a deep, distinguished voice answered. Arthur, it's Rosa, I said, my voice no longer trembling. It was the voice of the CEO of Rosa's Southern Comfort Catering. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Rosa? Good God, woman, you sound like you're in a wind tunnel. I called the hospital this morning to check on your room, and the administration told me you had checked out against medical advice. Where are you? Should I send a car? I'm at home, Arthur. I took an Uber. An Uber? With a fresh hip replacement? Where are Jackson and Chloe? You told me they were taking shifts. Arthur's voice rose with indignation. He had been my wealth manager and personal attorney for 25 years. He was the only person on earth who knew exactly what was inside that fireproof safe. They didn't show, Arthur. None of them did. I spent 15 days staring at a blank wall. A heavy, furious silence fell over the line. Arthur was a gentleman of the old school, a man who valued family loyalty above all else. Rosa, I am so profoundly sorry. Give me the word and I will drive over there right now and drag Jackson out of his office by his ear. No, I said sharply. No violence, Arthur. We are going to do this the right way. The legal way. I need a favor. Anything. Name it. I need you to run a full, comprehensive audit on every single account, every piece of property, every line of credit attached to my name. I want to know exactly where my money has gone for the past 5 years. Every wire transfer to Tyler, every gift to Chloe, and especially that $50,000 business loan I gave Jackson 3 years ago that he swore he was paying back. Consider it done, Arthur said, his tone shifting into professional, calculating mode. I'll have my junior associates pull the credit reports and bank histories immediately. Are you safe, Rosa? Do you have food? I have enough to get by until tomorrow. Run the audit, Arthur. Call me the minute you have it. I hung up, closed the leather binder, and finally took one of the strong pain pills the hospital had prescribed. I slept in the leather chair in my office, too exhausted and in too much pain to make it to my bedroom. The next morning, the winter sun was streaming through the office blinds, blindingly bright. I woke up stiff, my mouth dry, the hip throbbing with a dull, rhythmic pulse. Before I could even attempt to stand up, my phone rang. It was Arthur. "Good morning," I said, clearing the sleep from my throat. "Tell me you have something." "Rosa," Arthur began, and his voice wasn't just serious. It was tight, strained. "I had the team work through the night. We pulled your primary credit reports from Experian and TransUnion. We also pulled the title records on your house. And? Rosa, Jackson didn't just default on that $50,000 personal loan you gave him." Arthur paused, taking a heavy breath. "Are you sitting down?" "I haven't stood up since yesterday, Arthur. Spit it out. 6 months ago, a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, was opened against your primary residence, your house, the house you are sitting in right now." I froze. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. "A what?" "I own this house free and clear. I paid off the mortgage in 1998. "I know you did," Arthur said quietly. "But someone submitted an application for a HELOC to a secondary online lender. The application used your social security number, your financial history, and a digital signature that supposedly belongs to you. The line of credit was approved for $250,000. My hands started to shake, not from weakness, but from a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline. "How much was drawn from it?" $200,000, Arthur replied. "The funds were wired directly into the corporate operating account of Jackson's logistics company. Rosa, his business has been failing for a year. He's drowning in debt. He leveraged your home, the roof over your head, to bail out his sinking ship." I stared at the framed photo of Jackson on my desk, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man who had sat at my Thanksgiving table, eating my food, complaining about property taxes, knowing full well he had secretly mortgaged my home behind my back. He hadn't just abandoned me in the hospital because he was busy. He abandoned me because he was a coward. He couldn't look me in the eye knowing he had committed felony wire fraud and identity theft against his own mother. "Arthur," I whispered, my voice sounding like broken glass. "If he defaults on that line of credit—" "The bank forecloses on your house," Arthur finished for me. "They take the property. Rosa, this isn't just financial mismanagement. This is a federal crime. I have to advise you, as your attorney, we need to file a police report immediately. We need to claim identity theft to protect the asset." I closed my eyes. The image of Jackson in handcuffs, wearing an orange jumpsuit, flashed through my mind. A mother's instinct is to protect, always to protect. For a fraction of a second, the old Rosa, the woman who baked pies and paid off Tyler's debts, wanted to figure out a way to cover it up, to just pay off the HELOC from my investment accounts and pretend it never happened. But then I remembered the hospital. I remembered Kiara asking if she should call social services. I remembered the rotting turkey in my pitch-black refrigerator. They had dug my grave. They just didn't expect me to climb out of it holding a shovel. "No police, Arthur. Not yet. Rosa, be reasonable. If you acknowledge this debt—" "I didn't say I was acknowledging it," I cut him off, my voice turning into a whip crack in the silent room. "I said no police. If we send him to jail, he files for bankruptcy from a cell, and I look like the vindictive mother who ruined her son's life. No, I want him to feel it. I want all of them to feel it." "What are you planning?" Arthur asked, a hint of nervous respect creeping into his voice. I looked at the heavy fireproof safe. "I need you to draft some documents, Arthur. I need you to draw up a full, legally binding demand for repayment for every dime Jackson owes me. I need you to cancel every secondary credit card Chloe is an authorized user on. I need you to terminate the autopay on Tyler's car insurance and rent." "You're shutting off the valves," Arthur said softly. "I'm draining the swamp," I corrected him. "And Arthur, I want you to prepare an irrevocable trust. We are moving every single liquid asset I own out of my personal name. By the time I'm done with them, they won't be able to inherit the dust on my baseboards." "Rosa," Arthur chuckled, a dark, satisfying sound. "It will be my absolute pleasure. Give me 24 hours to draft the paperwork." "Take your time," I said, leaning back in the heavy leather chair, the pain in my hip completely forgotten, replaced by the burning, undeniable fire of purpose. "Let them get comfortable. Let them think I'm just a helpless old woman sitting in the dark. Because when I finally turn on the floodlights, there won't be a single shadow left for them to hide in. The hardest part about setting a trap isn't building it. It's having the discipline to sit perfectly still and wait for the snap. For the next 4 days, I became a ghost in my own home. I didn't answer their phone calls. I responded to their sporadic, guilt-driven text messages with single words: tired, sleeping, pain. I needed them to believe the narrative they had already written for me in their heads, that I was a frail, helpless woman, broken by surgery and slowly fading away in a quiet house. But behind closed doors, I was preparing for war. The first thing I did was hire a private physical therapist. I didn't use the clinic the hospital recommended, and I certainly didn't run it through my Medicare, because Jackson had a habit of snooping through my mail to check my medical claims. Instead, I called a premium cash-only concierge rehabilitation service. A retired military medic named Marcus showed up at my door every morning at 7. He didn't coddle me. He didn't treat me like a porcelain doll. "The bone is fixed, Miss Rosa," Marcus told me on the first day, handing me a resistance band. "The titanium is stronger than what you were born with. It's the muscle that's lazy. It's the mind that's scared. We're going to wake them both up." And we did. For 2 hours a day, I sweated, I gritted my teeth, and I pushed through agony that brought tears to my eyes. I walked the length of my hallway until my hands blistered from the walker. Then, I graduated to a cane. Every time I wanted to quit, every time the burning in my thigh told me to sit down, I thought about that dark refrigerator. I thought about the forged signature on the home equity loan. The pain in my hip was nothing compared to the fire in my chest. By Friday morning, I was sitting at my kitchen island, drinking black coffee, my cane resting against the stool. I felt a deep, radiating ache in my legs, but it was the good kind of ache, the ache of growing stronger. At exactly 9 a.m., Arthur Sterling called. "The pipeline is officially shut, Rosa," Arthur said, his voice crisp and professional. "As of this morning, the joint American Express account you shared with Chloe has been terminated. The automated clearinghouse drafts for Tyler's apartment and Geico auto policy have been revoked, and the courier just delivered the certified demand letter to Jackson's corporate office." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "How did you phrase Jackson's letter?" "Exactly as you requested," Arthur replied, a hint of dark amusement in his tone. "I stated that due to unexpected catastrophic medical debt from your extended hospital stay, your estate is undergoing a severe liquidity crisis. Therefore, we are formally calling in the $50,000 personal loan from 3 years ago, payable within 14 days. I also added a clause stating that failure to comply will result in a full forensic audit of your assets to liquidate property." I smiled. It was a beautiful, terrifying trap. By claiming I was broke from hospital bills, Jackson would panic. But the real genius was the threat of the forensic audit. Jackson knew that if Arthur started digging through my property titles to sell the house, he would immediately discover the $200,000 HELOC fraud. Jackson was now trapped in a corner of his own making. "Thank you, Arthur. Let's see who squeals first." It didn't take long. At 11:14 a.m., my phone started buzzing violently against the granite countertop. It was Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, she called again. Then came the text messages, popping up in rapid succession. "Mom, WTF is going on? Call me now. Mom, did you get hacked?" I picked up the phone and listened to the voicemails. "Mom, pick up the phone." Chloe's voice was shrill, echoing slightly, like she was in a large tiled room. "I am literally standing at the register at the Nordstrom at the Galleria. I tried to pay for my client appreciation gifts, and the cashier cut my card in half. She said the primary account holder reported it closed. It was so embarrassing, Mom. My clients were right there. Did you forget to pay the bill? Call Amex right now and fix this, please." I deleted the voicemail. For 5 years, I had paid off that emergency credit card. Her emergencies somehow always included designer shoes, spa retreats, and $500 dinners. Not anymore. Welcome to the real world, Chloe. An hour later, it was Tyler's turn. "Ma, help. Urgent." I waited 10 minutes, then texted back. "What is it, Tyler? I'm resting." My phone immediately rang. I answered it, putting it on speaker and making my voice sound weak and raspy. "Hello? Ma, oh my God, finally!" Tyler panted. "Listen, my landlord just taped a 3-day notice to pay or quit on my door. He said the auto draft bounced, and then I got an email from Geico saying my car insurance is suspended. Did your bank account get frozen or something?" "Oh, Tyler." I let out a long, shaky sigh. "I'm so sorry, baby. I don't know what to do. The hospital bills, They were so much higher than I thought. The deductible, the out-of-network fees, it wiped out my checking account. I had to stop all the automatic payments just to keep the lights on here. There was a dead silence on the line. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. He wasn't worried that his mother was supposedly penniless. He was calculating how this affected him. Wait, wiped out? Tyler's voice cracked. Like zero? Ma, how am I supposed to pay rent? My crypto portfolio is down 40% right now. You know I can't liquidate that. I'll take a massive loss. You promised you'd cover me until my startup launched. I'm sorry, sweetie. You're 32. You'll have to figure it out. Maybe get a shift at the grocery store? I have to go. My hip is hurting. I hung up before he could respond. 2 down, 1 to go. Jackson was the smart one. He didn't call crying about his credit cards. He didn't call at all on Friday. He was too busy staring down the barrel of a certified legal threat. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was sitting in his leased luxury office, sweating through his tailored suit, realizing that his house of cards was about to collapse. He couldn't pay me the $50,000. He certainly couldn't pay back the $200,000 forged line of credit. He had to find a way to neutralize me. He had to take control of the narrative, and more importantly, control of my estate, before Arthur Sterling pulled the trigger on that audit. On Saturday morning, a message popped up in our family group chat. Jackson, hey everyone, I'm back from Chicago. I've been reviewing Mom's situation and honestly, things are bad. Her finances are a mess from the surgery, and she sounds incredibly confused on the phone. She's making erratic decisions. We need an intervention before she loses the house or gets scammed. Family dinner at Mom's place tomorrow, Sunday at 6 p.m., mandatory attendance. We need to get on the same page and figure out what's best for her. Chloe, I'll be there. This is a nightmare. Tyler, see you there? I'm literally starving. I stared at the screen, a cold smile touching my lips. Figure out what's best for her. Translation, figure out how to shut her up and take the wheel. They thought they were cornering a wounded animal. They didn't realize they were walking straight into the slaughterhouse. Sunday arrived with a bitter, freezing rain that stripped the last of the dead leaves from the oak trees in my front yard. I spent the afternoon preparing my stage. I didn't cook. I didn't even turn on the oven. I wanted the house to smell exactly as it was, cold and empty. I dressed carefully. I put on a pair of oversized faded sweatpants and a thick, moth-eaten gray cardigan. I took a damp washcloth and wiped away any trace of the expensive moisturizer I usually wore, letting the natural ashiness of winter skin show. I didn't brush my hair out perfectly. I let it sit flat and tired against my scalp. I looked in the mirror. I looked exactly like a helpless, deteriorating woman who was losing her grip on reality. Perfect. At 5:45 p.m., I positioned myself at the head of the long oak dining table. I placed my aluminum walker prominently next to my chair, making sure it looked like my only lifeline. Underneath the table, hidden by the long tablecloth, was my sturdy wooden cane, and resting squarely in the center of the table was Arthur Sterling's black leather folder containing every financial document, every forged signature, and the new irrevocable trust. At exactly 6 p.m., the headlights of Jackson's BMW swept across the living room windows. A moment later, Chloe's SUV pulled in behind him. Tyler must have hitched a ride because he tumbled out of Chloe's back seat, pulling the hood of his sweatshirt up against the rain. I didn't get up to unlock the door. I let them use their spare keys. The front door opened and they blew in like a chaotic storm, shaking off umbrellas and complaining loudly about the weather. "Mom, we're here," Jackson called out. "In the dining room," I answered, keeping my voice soft and slightly unsteady. They walked in, bringing the smell of damp coats and cheap, greasy takeout. Jackson was carrying 2 plastic grocery bags filled with rotisserie chickens and pre-made potato salad from the local supermarket deli. A stark contrast to the massive Thanksgiving spread I had prepared for them just a month ago. They stopped at the edge of the dining room, taking me in. I saw the collective relief wash over their faces. They saw the oversized sweater, the hunched posture, the aluminum walker. They saw a victim. "Hey, Ma," Jackson said, forcing a tight, patronizing smile. He set the plastic bags on the beautiful oak table without bothering to put down a trivet. "Look at you. You look exhausted. Why didn't you turn the heat up? It's freezing in here." "Money is tight, Jackson," I whispered. "I have to save on the electric bill." Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms over her designer trench coat. She looked furious, her eyes puffy, likely from crying over her canceled credit cards. Well, money wouldn't be so tight if you didn't do crazy things like canceling my accounts, Mom. Do you know how humiliating that was? And mine, Tyler chimed in, slumping into a chair, not even bothering to take off his wet jacket. I'm literally about to be homeless, Ma, because you panicked over a hospital bill. Okay, guys, ease up, Jackson said, holding up a hand, playing the role of the reasonable mediator. He pulled out a chair and sat directly across from me. He folded his hands on the table. He looked like a man preparing to fire a low-level employee. Mom, we love you. That's why we're here. But we need to have a serious talk about reality. Reality? I asked, tilting my head slightly. Yes, Jackson said, his voice dropping into that deep, soothing tone he used on his clients. This whole situation, leaving the hospital early, cutting off the kids' support, sending me threatening legal letters from Arthur Sterling about a loan I'm already handling. Mom, it's not normal. It's erratic. He leaned forward, looking deeply into my eyes, trying to project a false warmth. The anesthesia, the trauma of the surgery, the isolation. It can do things to the mind, especially at your age. It causes confusion, paranoia. We spoke to a specialist. It's called hospital-induced delirium. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch out. Hospital-induced delirium. They had really done their homework. They were building a medical defense to strip me of my rights. So, I said slowly, what are you saying, Jackson? Chloe reached into her expensive leather tote bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slid it across the table until it rested against the plastic containers of cheap chicken. We're saying you shouldn't have to carry this burden anymore, Mom, Chloe said, her voice dripping with fake, sugary sympathy. You need to rest. You need to focus on your physical recovery. Jackson and I can handle the stressful stuff. The bills, the house, the bank accounts. Jackson tapped the envelope. Inside here are the papers for a conservatorship and a durable power of attorney. It names me and Chloe as your legal guardians regarding financial and medical decisions. All you have to do is sign, Mom. We'll take over the mortgage. We'll handle Arthur Sterling and your medical debt. We even found a beautiful assisted living community just 30 minutes from here. They have a heated pool for your hip. He pushed a shiny, glossy brochure across the table. Autumn Haven, where your golden years truly shine. A nursing home. They were trying to lock me in a nursing home and seize my estate. Tyler perked up. Yeah, Ma. And once Jackson has control of the accounts, he can reinstate my allowance and pay my back rent. It's a win for everybody. They sat back in their chairs, a united front of greed and betrayal, waiting for the frail, confused old woman to pick up a pen and sign her life away. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the glossy brochure. And then, slowly, deliberately, I sat up straight. I rolled my shoulders back, shedding the hunched posture. I let the frumpy cardigan slip off my shoulders, revealing the crisp, tailored silk blouse underneath. I reached out, picked up the brochure for Autumn Haven, and ripped it cleanly in half. The sound was sharp and loud in the quiet room. All three of them flinched. A heated pool, I said, my voice no longer a whisper. It was loud, resonant, and dripping with absolute authority. The voice of Rosa's Southern Comfort Catering. The voice of an $8 million empire. How generous of you, Jackson, spending my money to lock me away. Jackson's fake smile faltered. His eyes darted to my face, realizing something had shifted. Mom, I know you're upset, but you have to understand. Shut your mouth, I snapped, the words cracking like a whip. Tyler jumped in his seat. Chloe's mouth dropped open. Jackson stared at me, stunned into silence. I reached under the table, grabbed my wooden cane, and pushed myself up from the chair. I didn't touch the aluminum walker. I stood tall at the head of the table, looking down at the three strangers I had raised. I reached out and pulled Arthur Sterling's black leather folder toward me. You want to talk about reality, Jackson? I asked, my eyes locking onto his, watching the color slowly drain from his face. Let's talk about reality. Let's talk about the $200,000 you stole from me. The trap hadn't just snapped shut. It had crushed bone. $200,000, Jackson repeated, the words stumbling out of his mouth as if he had forgotten how to speak English. He looked at Chloe, then at Tyler, but they were staring at him with equal parts confusion and horror. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing violently. Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. The anesthesia. Do not insult my intelligence by blaming the anesthesia again. I said, my voice eerily calm. I opened the black leather folder and pulled out a stack of papers, tossing them onto the center of the oak table. They landed right on top of his absurd power of attorney documents. That is a copy of the home equity line of credit application submitted to a secondary lender 6 months ago. It has my social security number on it. It has my home listed as collateral. And the $200,000 drawn from it was wired directly into the operating account of Jackson Logistics, LLC. Jackson's hands began to shake. The smug, patriarchal aura he had walked in with evaporated instantly, leaving behind a terrified, desperate little boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It was a bridge loan, Ma, Jackson stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the freezing temperature of the room. The supply chain issues. The business was taking a hit. I just needed to float payroll for a couple of quarters. I was going to pay it back before you even noticed. I didn't want to worry you. You didn't want to worry me? I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You forged my digital signature and leveraged the roof over my head, the house you grew up in, to save your failing company. That's not protecting me, Jackson. That's felony wire fraud and identity theft. Fraud? Chloe shrieked, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. She turned to her brother, her eyes wide with panic. Jackson, what did you do? If the business goes under, they'll foreclose on Mom's house. Where is she supposed to live? Oh, don't pretend you care about where I live, Chloe, I snapped, turning my gaze to my daughter. She shrank back in her chair as if she had been slapped. You just handed me a brochure for a nursing home. You were perfectly happy to throw me in a facility and sell this house to cover your own tracks. Mom, that's not true. We just wanted you to have 24/7 care, Chloe cried, her voice hitching into a familiar manipulative whine. You wanted control of my accounts because I cut off your American Express, I corrected her. I pulled another document from the folder. Let's talk about your grind, Chloe. Let's talk about the $40,000 in credit card debt you've racked up this year alone. Trips to Aspen, designer bags, 5-star restaurants. You portray this image of a successful girl boss realtor on Instagram, but the truth is, you haven't closed a major listing in 8 months. You were using my account to fund a lifestyle you can't afford, while I was eating hospital jello alone in the dark. Chloe covered her face with her manicured hands, sobbing loudly. I have to keep up appearances, Mom. In my industry, if you don't look wealthy, clients won't trust you. It was an investment in my brand. Your brand is a lie, I said coldly. Okay, fine, Tyler yelled, standing up and slamming his hands on the table, knocking over a container of potato salad. Jackson messed up. Chloe's broke. But what about me? I didn't steal anything from you, Ma. I just asked for a little help while I get my crypto exchange off the ground. Why did you cancel my rent? I'm your youngest son. You can't just throw me out on the street. Tyler, you are 32 years old, I said, staring at him until he broke eye contact and looked at the floor. You don't have a job. You have a hobby that loses money. I have paid your rent, your car insurance, and your cell phone bill for 10 years. I didn't throw you on the street. I simply stopped carrying you. If you fall, it's because you never bothered to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. Jackson wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, taking a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. Okay, Mom, you're angry. You have every right to be. I made a massive mistake with the HELOC. I admit it, but yeah, we're still family. We can fix this in-house. Don't go to the police. We don't need lawyers involved. I'll sign a promissory note for the $200,000. Just sign the conservatorship so we can restructure the estate and protect the assets from creditors. He still didn't get it. He still thought he was the smartest person in the room. I think, a deep, resonant voice echoed from the hallway, that Miss Rosa has had quite enough of your restructuring, Jackson. All 3 of my children whipped their heads around. Emerging from the shadows of the hallway, carrying a polished leather briefcase, was Arthur Sterling. He looked immaculate in a charcoal 3-piece suit, exuding the kind of quiet, devastating power that only decades of high-level legal experience can forge. Mr. Sterling? Jackson choked out, his face draining of whatever color it had left. What are you doing here? I am here in my capacity as Rosa's primary legal counsel and the executor of her estate, Arthur said smoothly, stepping into the dining room and standing firmly by my side. He placed his briefcase on the table next to the cheap rotisserie chickens. And I must say, Jackson, suggesting a conservatorship for a woman who has vastly outperformed the S&P 500 index for the last 30 years is not just insulting, it borders on comedic. Chloe stopped crying, her tear-streaked face contorting in pure confusion. Outperformed the S&P? What are you talking about? Mom lives on Dad's small life insurance and a meager pension. Arthur let out a dry, humorless chuckle. He looked at me, and I gave him a slight nod of permission. Your mother, Arthur began, popping the golden latches on his briefcase, has allowed you to believe that out of a misplaced sense of maternal protection. She wanted you to build your own lives, but since you have decided to treat her like a burden to be discarded, she has instructed me to pull back the curtain. Arthur extracted a thick, bound financial portfolio and laid it open in front of Jackson. This is a consolidated statement of your mother's current liquid assets. The index funds, the municipal bonds, the high-yield dividend accounts funded entirely by the profits of her catering empire, which she quietly invested while you were all still in grade school. Jackson leaned forward, his eyes scanning the bottom line. I watched his pupils dilate. I watched his jaw go completely slack. He literally stopped breathing for 5 full seconds. $8.4 million? Jackson whispered, the numbers sounding like a foreign language on his tongue. Wait, what? Chloe shrieked, lunging across the table, her acrylic nails scraping the wood to look at the paper. 8 million? Mom, you're a millionaire? Tyler fell back into his chair as if he had been physically struck by a heavyweight boxer. You had $8 million this whole time, and you let me drive a 2012 Honda Civic? I let you drive the car you earned, I corrected him sharply. Chloe's eyes were wide, suddenly flashing with a frantic, greedy light. The tears of shame were completely gone, replaced by the ugly glint of dollar signs. Mom! Oh my God! This changes everything. Jackson, the business is saved. Mom, you can pay off the HELOC. You can clear my credit cards, and we can hire a full-time live-in nurse for you. We don't need the nursing home. We're rich. The sheer audacity of it. The immediate reflexive pivot from let's lock her away in a facility to let's spend her millions. It didn't even occur to Chloe to apologize for the betrayal. Her only thought was how my lifetime of labor could benefit her. You misunderstand, Chloe, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a freezing temperature. You aren't rich. Rosa is rich. And as of yesterday morning, every single dollar of that $8.4 million has been transferred into a fully funded, irrevocable trust. The room went dead silent, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. An irrevocable trust? Jackson repeated, the panic returning tenfold. As a businessman, he knew exactly what that meant. Precisely. Arthur smiled, a predator finally baring its teeth. Rosa no longer legally owns those assets. The trust does, which means they cannot be leveraged, seized, or claimed by any family member. Furthermore, Rosa has executed a new last will and testament. Upon her passing, the entirety of the trust will be donated to a charitable foundation of her choosing. Your names have been entirely expunged from the document. You will inherit nothing. You can't do that, Tyler screamed, his face turning an angry, mottled red. That's our money. That's family money. You can't just give our inheritance to a bunch of strangers. Those were gifts. It's not your inheritance, Tyler. It's my money, I said, my voice steady and unwavering, echoing off the high ceilings. I earned every penny of it, and I get to decide where it goes. Jackson stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like a cornered, desperate animal. This is insane. You're cutting off your own flesh and blood because we were busy for a couple of weeks? Because you were busy? I repeated, leaning forward, resting my full weight on my cane. You left me in a hospital bed for 15 days, Jackson. I couldn't walk. I couldn't get to the bathroom by myself. I stared at the door every single day, waiting for the children I poured my soul into, and nobody came. A stranger had to drive me home. I came home to a freezing house and a rotting Thanksgiving turkey because you stole the money I gave you to pay the light bill. My voice cracked, raw and full of the pain I had buried under layers of stoicism. You didn't abandon me because you were busy. You abandoned me because I wasn't useful to you anymore. You thought the well was dry. You thought I was just an old broken woman who couldn't give you another dime, so you threw me away like trash. I looked at each of them, Jackson's deep shame, Chloe's naked greed, Tyler's pathetic entitlement. Well, I said softly, the anger settling into a cold, unbreakable resolve. The well isn't dry, but it is poisoned for you. Arthur, give them the final documents. Arthur pulled 3 separate thick envelopes from his briefcase and slid one to each of my children. What is this? Chloe asked, staring at the envelope like it was a live rattlesnake. Those, Arthur explained, are formal demands for repayment. Tyler, yours is an itemized invoice for the last 3 years of rent and auto insurance, totaling $42,000, which was legally structured in your mother's tax filings as an interest-bearing loan against your name. Chloe, yours is for the $60,000 in credit card debt you incurred on a joint account where Rosa was the primary guarantor. And Jackson, yours is for the $50,000 personal loan, plus a formal notice. Jackson ripped open the envelope, his eyes scanning the legal jargon. Notice of what? Notice that if the $200,000 HELOC is not paid in full and closed within 30 days, I will be forwarding all evidence of your forged signatures to the district attorney's office for federal prosecution, Arthur said smoothly, adjusting his cuffs. Have a wonderful evening. They were utterly destroyed. The safety net they had spent their entire lives taking for granted had not just vanished. It had turned into a steel trap that had just snapped shut on their necks. Mom, please, Jackson whispered, dropping the papers, his arrogant corporate facade completely shattered. He fell to his knees right there on the dining room floor, grabbing the hem of my skirt. Please, Ma, if you do this, I lose everything. The house, the business, my wife, everything. I'll go to jail. Please, I'm your son. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Chloe began to hyperventilate, clutching her chest, her makeup running down her face in ugly black streaks. Tyler just sat there, staring blankly at the wall, a boy realizing he finally had to grow up. A month ago, seeing Jackson on his knees would have broken my heart. I would have reached down, stroked his hair, and told him everything was going to be all right. I would have written the check to save him, but the woman who would have written that check died in room 402 of the orthopedic ward. I looked down at my eldest son. You made your bed, Jackson, and now you're going to lose it. I pulled my skirt out of his grasp. I turned to Arthur. Arthur, please show my guests out, and make sure they leave their spare keys on the counter. The locksmith is coming tomorrow morning at 8 to change the deadbolts. With pleasure, Rosa, Arthur said. Mom, you can't, Chloe screamed as Arthur stepped forward, gesturing firmly toward the door. We're your family. Family takes care of each other, Chloe, I said, turning my back on them and walking slowly toward the hallway. You are just people I used to know. I didn't look back as Arthur ushered them out of the house. I heard the protests, the crying, the begging, and then I heard the heavy oak front door slam shut, followed by the definitive heavy click of the deadbolt locking them out of my life forever. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the agonizing silence of abandonment. It was the beautiful golden silence of peace. The winter melted away, and with it, the suffocating weight I had carried for 40 years. Spring arrived in the city with a sudden, violent burst of color, the dogwood trees blooming brilliant white and pink. It felt incredibly fitting. I was no longer in the suburbs to see the oak trees in my front yard bud. I had sold the house. I didn't need 4 bedrooms of empty memories. I bought a stunning, sun-drenched penthouse condominium downtown, overlooking the skyline. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a concierge downstairs, and 0 stairs to climb. My hip, thanks to Marcus's relentless physical therapy, was fully healed. I threw the aluminum walker into a dumpster back in February. By April, the wooden cane was sitting in the back of my closet, gathering dust. I walked with a slight limp on rainy days, but mostly, I walked with a stride that commanded respect. I was alive. For the first time since my husband died, for the first time since my children were born, I belonged entirely to myself. But karma, as they say, never misses an address. And Arthur Sterling made absolutely sure it was delivered via certified mail. I didn't relish in my children's downfall. I didn't cheer when their lives imploded. A mother never truly rejoices in the suffering of the children she brought into the world. But I watched it happen with the cold, detached clarity of a judge handing down a necessary sentence. Jackson fell first, and he fell the hardest. The 30 days Arthur gave him to clear the forged $200,000 HELOC came and went. Jackson tried to take out loans from predatory lenders. He tried to sell his cars. He even tried to beg his wealthy father-in-law for a bailout. But his father-in-law ran a background check, discovered the wire fraud against me, and slammed the door in his face. On day 31, Arthur Sterling forwarded the forensic evidence to the district attorney. Jackson avoided federal prison by the skin of his teeth, taking a brutal plea deal that required him to liquidate his failing logistics company entirely to pay restitution to the bank. The felony conviction on his record meant he immediately lost his high-paying corporate director job. His wife, who had married the illusion of wealth, filed for divorce and took their suburban mansion in the settlement. The last I heard, Jackson, the man who couldn't find an hour to visit his mother in the hospital because he was too busy closing deals, had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. He is currently living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment near the airport, working the night shift as a dispatcher for a local trucking company. The irony is almost poetic. Chloe's descent was louder, broadcasted in real time before she suddenly went completely dark. Arthur took her to civil court for the $60,000 in joint credit card debt. She tried to ignore the summons, treating it like a parking ticket. The judge didn't find her girl boss attitude charming. He ordered a wage garnishment and authorized the bank to seize her assets. One afternoon, right in the middle of an open house she was hosting in a wealthy neighborhood, a tow truck arrived and repossessed her leased Range Rover. It was caught on a neighbor's Ring camera and circulated around her real estate agency. Her broker fired her the next day. Without my bank account to fund her designer clothes, Botox appointments, and lavish dinners, Chloe's influencer lifestyle evaporated overnight. She couldn't afford her luxury loft downtown. Today, if you want to find Chloe, you won't find her in Aspen. You will find her wearing a polyester uniform, working 50 hours a week as a hostess at a chained steakhouse out by the interstate. She is finally learning the true value of a $20 tip. And then there was Tyler, my baby boy, the crypto bro visionary who thought real work was beneath him. When the rent checks from me stopped, his landlord evicted him within 45 days. With no credit, no work history, and $42,000 of legally structured debt hanging over his head from my estate, Tyler had nowhere to go. He ended up in front of a county judge over unpaid state taxes and accumulating citations. The judge, tired of seeing able-bodied 30-somethings grifting the system, offered him a choice: 60 days in county jail, or a court-mandated community labor program designed to teach basic job skills and garnish his minimum wage to pay his debts. Tyler chose the labor program. He was assigned to the janitorial and groundskeeping crew of a local senior care facility. The facility's name? Autumn Haven. Yes, the exact same nursing home he and his siblings had tried to lock me away in. Now, 5 days a week, Tyler is the one scrubbing the floors around the heated pool, taking out the medical waste and serving lukewarm meals to the elderly residents he once thought were so disposable. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor that is simply too perfect to invent. With the rot finally cleared from my life, I had space to plant something new. I didn't need $8 million to buy designer bags or yachts. I had spent my life serving people through food, and I realized I still wanted to serve. But this time, on my own terms. On a bright Tuesday morning in May, I ordered an Uber. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I had the driver drop me off at the exact same sliding doors of the hospital I had painfully shuffled out of 5 months prior. I didn't have a walker. I wore a sharp, tailored navy pantsuit and a string of genuine pearls. I walked through the lobby, my heels clicking confidently on the linoleum, and took the elevator up to the orthopedic ward. I walked up to the nurse's station. Behind the high counter, a familiar face was intensely typing on a tablet. "Excuse me," I said. Kiara looked up, her dark eyes tired but kind. It took her a second to register the woman standing in front of her. When she finally recognized my face, she dropped her pen. "Miss Rosa?" Kiara gasped, standing up so fast she knocked her stool backward. She rushed around the counter, her eyes wide with shock. "My God, look at you! You look incredible. You're walking without a cane. I told you I would handle it, Kiara." I smiled, stepping forward and pulling the young nurse into a deep, genuine hug. She smelled like clean linens and lavender hand sanitizer. "I thought about you every day," Kiara whispered, stepping back, wiping a sudden tear from her eye. "I was so worried. Did they finally step up?" "No, sweetheart," I said, my smile unwavering. "They stepped out, and I stepped forward." I looked around the ward. I heard the familiar, rhythmic beeping of the monitors. I saw an elderly man in a wheelchair staring blankly at the wall, a half-eaten tray of food pushed aside. I saw the empty chairs next to the beds. "I'm here to see the hospital administrator," I told Kiara, "and the board of directors. Do you know if they're in the building?" Kiara blinked. "Yes, The executive offices are on the top floor. Miss Rosa, what are you doing here? I reached into my designer handbag and pulled out a thick, beautifully embossed folder bearing the insignia of the newly formed Rosa Hayes Irrevocable Trust. I'm here to make a donation, Kiara, a very large one. I looked at her, noting the exhaustion in her posture, the heavy workload she carried to care for people who had been forgotten. And I'm going to need a director of operations for a new project, someone who actually understands what it means to hold a patient's hand when nobody else is coming. Are you tired of working 12-hour floor shifts? Kiara's mouth fell open. Miss Rosa, are you serious? I have never been more serious in my life. 6 months later, we cut the ribbon. It was a beautiful ceremony covered by the local news. They called it the Dignity Wing. It wasn't just a physical ward. It was a comprehensive advocacy program funded entirely by my trust, operating within the hospital. We hired social workers, elder care attorneys, and private home health aides. Our mission was simple. No senior citizen admitted to that hospital would ever be discharged into an empty, dark house. If their families abandoned them, my foundation stepped in. We provided them with free legal counsel to protect their assets from predatory relatives. We arranged for high-quality post-op care. We made sure their refrigerators were full and their lights stayed on. I stood at the podium in front of the hospital, looking out at the crowd of doctors, nurses, and local politicians. Arthur Sterling stood in the front row, clapping proudly. Kiara, the newly appointed director of the Dignity Project, stood right beside me. When it was my turn to speak, I leaned into the microphone. I didn't need notes. For a long time, I told the crowd, my voice projecting loud and clear over the courtyard, I believed that a mother's love was measured by her sacrifice. I believed that to be a good mother meant making yourself small so your children could be big. It meant quietly handing over your time, your money, and your boundaries until there was nothing left of you but a shadow. I looked directly into the news cameras, knowing that somewhere, sitting in a cramped apartment or taking a break in a diner kitchen, my children might be watching. But sacrifice without boundaries isn't love. It's self-destruction. We teach people how to treat us. When we allow ourselves to be treated like an appliance, used until broken and then discarded, we do a disservice not only to ourselves but to the people we are raising. They don't learn respect. They learn entitlement. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm autumn sun on my face. I am 69 years old. I was left alone in a room in this very building, and I thought my life was over. I thought my value had expired. But the silence of that room taught me the greatest truth I have ever known. Your worth is not determined by how much you can give to ungrateful people. Your worth is inherent. It belongs to you. I smiled, a real radiant smile. To anyone out there watching, especially to the women, the mothers, the grandmothers who feel invisible. Stop shrinking. Stop pouring your water into broken cups. Build your own empire, even if it's just the empire of your own peace of mind. And if the people sitting at your table don't respect the hands that prepared the meal, take the plate back. The crowd erupted into applause. I stepped away from the podium, taking Kiara's arm. We walked through the sliding glass doors of the hospital, not as a victim and her nurse, but as two women ready to change the world. My name is Rosa. I am a mother, a widow, a self-made millionaire, and a survivor. I survived the betrayal of my own blood. I cut the dead weight, and I finally learned how to fly. And that, my friends, is the story of Rosa. If you are listening to this right now, and you are pouring your soul into people who don't even bother to check if your cup is empty, let Rosa's story be your wake-up call. It is never too late to rewrite your narrative. It is never too late to check the locks on your doors and the balances on your accounts. You are not a bank, and you are certainly not a doormat. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your own family? Have you ever had to stop being the nice guy to protect your own sanity and survival? Let me know in the comments below. Your story might be the exact validation someone else needs to hear today. If Rosa's journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. Until next time, remember, you teach people how to treat you. Stay strong, stay sharp, and take back your plate.